Welcome to Techonomy 23. Our program will begin in 5 minutes. Please make your way to your seats and take this moment to silence your cell phones. We will be getting started shortly. Thank you. Please be seated and take the moment to silence your cell phones. We will be getting started momentarily. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to Techonomy 23. Please welcome to the stage the CEO of Worth Media Group, Josh Campbell.
Welcome everyone to Techonomy 23. Excited to be here in beautiful Lake Nona, Florida. Many of you here have joined us on the West Coast over the past decade. Some of you are new to our community, but what I would say is by Tuesday, you'll consider yourselves techonomists. And what do we mean by that word, techonomists? Is that you're optimists in that technology will accelerate the pace of change, will really have a positive sort of impact on society and the economy, but we're also realists that will really dive deep into understanding sort of the risks of if we let technology sort of take control of the world without putting guardrails in place. So I'm not going to do the turn to your right, turn to your left to meet someone new, but hopefully really by the end of this event, you'll get to know a lot of really new and interesting, people. The theme is the promise and peril of AI. I look back at some of our events, and for the past decade, we've been covering AI. So people said, why now? And obviously, we all know that AI has really sort of taken over all of, a lot of our professional lives, our personal lives. So over the next couple days, we'll dive deep into the responsibility of what it means to harness technologies like artificial intelligence in all of our lives. Some of the key things about the next couple days. Everything is on the record. We encourage you to promote, to put it out on social, Instagram, LinkedIn. We truly believe that these types of conversations need to get amplified to a broader audience that can unfortunately join us here over the next 3 days. We do this really with the support of a great group of partners, especially this year, moving the event. We have to recognize and thank Lake Nona and Tavistock for helping us move the event here, to our partner KPMG, who you'll hear from over the next couple days, as well as Medtronic, BMC, the Orlando Economic Partnership, as well as GMAG and WealthSpire. Our social handles, as I mentioned, at Worth Mag, Techonomy, the importance of Wi-Fi still. So Lake Nona Wave, the hotel network, and the hashtag. So before we get moving any further, I do want to bring up our chairman, Jim McCann, who's also the founder, CEO, and chairman of 1-800-Flowers, to talk a little about the next couple days. So please give me a round of applause for welcoming Jim McCann.
Well, welcome. You heard about this wonderful spot we're here in Lake Nona. It's not an accident that we moved our event from the West Coast after a dozen years or so to come here, because this is a community that's built about technology, all around technology. The best part of these events for me is the clinches. Things like tonight, the different cocktail parties we had, the dinner we had outside. What a beautiful spot that is outside there, isn't it? One of the things I've learned from the Tavistock group who developed this property is lighting matters. You see how clever they are about lighting and all the rooms, all the facilities, and of course outside. And I'm done. I've already learned as much as I can learn, and we haven't even really started the program yet. I got to hang around with people I admire and love and respect, like Craig Mundy, who's here tonight, Ken and Angela Washington. These are people who I traveled to the end of the earth to spend time with, and I already got to spend some time with them tonight. I learn from them, I get inspired by them, I catch attitude from them. I still don't know what the hell they're talking about, but I'm here to try and figure that out. So if you have the pleasure that I've had over the next couple of days to meet people, to spend time with people you really admire and respect, to develop new ideas, to develop understandings about where this could take us. We had a couple of breakouts here earlier today, and it just already changed my minds about how important this can be for us, and how I need to learn quickly, and how I have in the audience some of my fellow florists here tonight. We have a lot to learn. It's going to change our worlds in ways that, frankly, we're here to try and anticipate what does that mean? How does it change our worlds? How do we help our community, our customers, to have more and better relationships? Because at the end of the day, we've discovered in our primary day jobs that giving, which is the business we're in, that giving is the gift. And there's scientific evidence to the benefit that has to us when we're the giver. And so we're here to help figure out how do we help members of our community to have those relationships, have more and better relationships, because quite selfishly, if you have more and better relationships, there are more birthdays and more anniversaries and new babies. So we're selfishly motivated to help our community have better lives. So there's a lot we're going to learn in the next couple of days, and I can't wait to hear the program we have for you just even here this evening. So let me invite Josh back on stage to introduce what we're going to have for us tonight. I look forward to getting to know the few of you who I don't know, and to get to share some ideas and thoughts together, because we need a lot of help, and you know the answers, so we're here to learn from you. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Jim. So many of you may have seen about a week ago, probably two now, President Biden put out an executive order around AI. Arthi Prabhakar was supposed to join us, and unfortunately, POTUS asked her not to leave DC this week. So even though I argued with her and said, please come to Florida, she said, well, the president has said you need to stay in Washington, DC. So I did a call with her on Thursday to talk about the executive order that I think will really help us set the stage of what we'll be discussing over the next couple days.
Josh, it's great to be here with you. I'm so sorry I can't be there in person. I would love to be in Florida with everyone. It's been a very busy time here at the White House. As I think you saw just over a week ago, President Biden signed an executive order that is the most significant action that anyone has ever taken anywhere in the world on artificial intelligence. And what is behind that is the fact that artificial intelligence is everywhere in our lives. And President Biden understood that it was a very powerful force that's shaping this time that we're in. And he's been very clear from the beginning that we needed to move with urgency, and that our job is, as a country, is to make sure that we manage the risks of this powerful technology in order to seize its benefits. And that's what this executive order is all about.
So Arthi joined us back in 2015 at Techonomy when she was the head of DARPA. So we started talking a little more about what I mentioned earlier, AI, machine learning. A lot of these at the enterprise level have been things that we've been talking about for over a decade. So why now? Why now does the White House get involved and decide to put out this executive order?
You know, artificial intelligence has seeped into people's lives, and I think it's obvious, or to most people, it's pretty obvious that AI is behind the screen when you get an ad that's targeted to you. But it's showing up in a lot of other ways that aren't as visible. It might be behind the diagnosis that you get from a doctor. It's often behind whether you get a yay or a nay on a mortgage application. And these are things that I think are not as visible. And then, of course, what has happened recently is the bursting on the scene of chatbots and image generators with generative AI. And that's captured a lot of attention because these are now AI systems that are trained on the kind of data that we human beings communicate by. So that's the landscape in which all of this is happening. But I think it's important to be clear that this White House, Biden-Harris administration, was focused on AI before chatbots seized the public imagination. Over a year ago, in October of 2022, we released a blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. And what that document does is say very clearly what our values are about how we're going to use these kinds of powerful technologies. It was very clear about focusing on safety, on transparency, on individual privacy, and on freedom from discrimination. And that's exactly what you'll see throughout all the work that we're doing. And I think it's so important to note that when you're in choppy waters with a fast-moving technology like this, there's no more important time to steer by the light of our values. So that's what that was all about. It got us off to a good start. And then after a lot of engagement with all kinds of communities, we've now come to the point with this executive order, which is one of the really big steps in the work that we're doing.
And for those of you who joined us at Techonomy in 2018, I interviewed Michael Kratsios, who was the CTO under Donald Trump at the time. And really, again, even that administration was thinking about AI. Michael happens to be at a company now, Scale AI. So a lot of the work he was doing in the Trump administration, he's now doing in his professional career. But as we thought about this idea of the promise and peril of AI, obviously, a lot of us are concerned with the risks, right? As we talk about the great things it could do for healthcare and financial services, we also have to be thinking about the risks and how do we, deal with that, through our businesses.
What's important with this broad technology, we've really approached it by saying individuals or organizations or companies may focus on one particular application or risks, but our job is to think about this for the United States of America, and for the country, we need to keep the broad set of applications and risks in focus. And so I tend to think of them in four very broad categories. There are risks of fraud and deception, risks of safety of various different types. There are risks of bias and discrimination being embedded in algorithms. And then there are risks to the way that we work and risks to jobs in the economy. And those are very different kinds of issues. They arise in different kinds of applications, but they each need some thoughtful approaches to make sure that we're dealing with the problems. Again, the whole point of the exercise is to make sure that we can use the technology in powerful ways, and we're starting by focusing on mitigating these risks.
Yeah, and it was interesting, as I mentioned earlier, we're optimists, right? I think many of the people here are optimists in that technology, no matter if it's cloud, social, mobile, big data, or all the trends that it's enabled, are actually going to have a net positive effect on society versus obviously thinking about the risks, but we do have to take them into consideration. So, I asked Arthi about, what is she most excited about? Where does she see the most promise and opportunity?
The market is going to make amazing things happen, and it has to be done responsibly, but I'm very sure that our creative companies and entrepreneurs are going to find amazing applications for AI. But in government, we're very excited about harnessing it in responsible ways for the work that we do for the country. That includes everything from national security to all the ways that we interact with citizens, from when you're paying your taxes to benefits programs and services that the government provides. Just a couple of specific examples. What we're going to be able to do in terms of weather and climate modeling, getting much more specific down to a 1 kilometer resolution, being able to predict with greater fidelity out for greater periods of time what kind of weather is coming your way, or in the long term, what kind of weather extremes as climate changes do you need to be able to plan for. There are a whole host of opportunities there. There are going to be opportunities we're starting to see in research, people using powerful AI tools to change how we design chemicals and biological materials and structural materials and electronic materials of all sorts. And this ability to create materials with properties that we've never seen before, or biology that can do things we've never seen before, these two are the kinds of things that AI is starting to unlock. And if you think about how we build a sustainable future, a clean energy future, these are the kinds of underlying technologies that can take off once we really master this technology.
So some of you joined us this afternoon for tennis with, former world champion Lindsay Davenport, and I got to talk to her a little about now she's a tennis commentator, and that this year they used Gen AI to do all of the commentary on many of the courts, replacing humans. So obviously in every one of our fields, we're thinking about how is AI being used to augment human behavior and jobs, but also potentially replace what we all do, the attack on the cognitive class, right? That's never probably seen such an impact. One of the things that the administration talked about was the positive impact on the economy by AI and the growth in jobs, which I really wanted to dig a little deeper with, so ask Arthi about it.
I find you have to train yourself to be able to hold the bright side and the dark side in your head at the same time. And rather than, choosing an optimistic or a pessimistic frame, what I'm really interested in is what are the actions that we're going to take that get us on a positive path? Because if you think about, first of all, the huge number of jobs that AI is now going to come into, especially with generative AI, we've got some choices to make, because what I think we would all like to see is that AI helps people doing all kinds of jobs, helps them to do more so that they can earn more. And it could come out that way. But we already know that workers are using AI technologies to surveil their workers in some really creepy and uncomfortable ways. We know that it can hollow out jobs, and we know it can eliminate jobs. But these are choices that for us to make. And so one of the actions that the president signed in the executive order is focused on exactly this question of looking ahead at the impacts that will come as this technology unfolds, understanding its impact on work, and then taking the actions that can get us on a track where it really is good for workers in all kinds of different areas.
By a quick show of hands, how many of you in the room think AI will have a positive impact on the growth of jobs? See, I would say mostly optimists in the room, which is great. So yeah, I think, again, as many of us think about everything from the Industrial Revolution and the steam engine replacing people to what AI is doing, that will be a big part of the next couple days of conversation. We talked a little about how wars and defense will be fought in the future, not necessarily on land, but potentially in the cloud, and how AI and how the government is thinking about AI as a nation state and globally.
Military systems and how military systems use AI, how in combat warfighters use AI. This is for sure a place where these powerful technologies are being pursued by us and by others around the world. But I want to step back from that and just observe that, when you have a powerful technology like this, just as you would expect, every country around the world is racing to use AI to build a future that expresses their values. And we can disagree about a lot of things in this country, but the one thing I think we would all agree on is none of us wants to live in a future that is shaped by technologies that have been driven by authoritarian regimes. And this is really the core issue and why President Biden has been so focused on getting AI right for the American people, because he's been clear that American leadership in the world today requires American leadership in AI. That's what we're trying to get done here, and that's why I think this executive order was such a big step.
And then finally, I asked Arthi about, she knows who was in the room, that we have entrepreneurs, executives, about that public-private partnership, about how government and industry work together to shape some of these policies, to sort of set our path going forward. And this is what she had to say.
In this work, we had roundtables where we heard from companies, civil society organizations. We had a lot of individual meetings with people in all different parts of the entrepreneurial ecosystem around AI, with academics and leading edge researchers. And all of those voices continue to be important. So please make sure we are still hearing from you. That's the only way that we're going to make policies that actually work for the things that we have to do ahead. I want to call out one specific area where I think we're going to be able to do some big, hard things together, but it is going to take public and private sectors working closely together. And this is the issue of how do you know when your AI model is safe and effective and trustworthy? The answer to almost every question about how do we get AI right comes down to, well, once we know this model is right, that it's going to give the, it's going to do the work that it's supposed to do, it's going to be safe, it's not going to come off the rails, it's going to be trustworthy. Everything depends on our ability to understand that about a specific AI model. And our tools and methods for doing that today are almost non-existent. I like to liken this to medicine before there were clinical trials, when anyone could sell you a potion and it might kill you or it might make you well. But clinical trials were a statistical way, not of solving all the problem, but of giving us enough confidence in a particular drug to be able to harvest the benefit of pharmaceuticals and contain their risks. We're not near that yet for artificial intelligence. It's a complex, opaque technology, and everything that happens with AI happens because human beings interact with it. And if you think AI is complex and opaque, take a look at the human beings that are driving it. That's the work that has to get done. And the National Institute of Standards and Technology and the Commerce Department has some big assignments under the executive order. It's an organization I used to lead, and I have great confidence because of the way it partners with industry and academia that it's going to step up to that. But we really need people working in companies using AI and developing AI. We need the research community as well to come to the table to help define what it looks like to be able to know when this technology is safe and effective and trustworthy. That's some of the big work that's ahead of us.
So I think, a lot of the answers and the questions we heard from Arthi are things that we'll try to tackle over the next couple days. Many of you representing industry, academia, will struggle with many of these topics. We will figure out, do we trust government to put the right processes and policies in place? So we really, hope that over the next, 2 days, you'll meet people, you'll exchange. I did ask her in closing about sort of our faith in government and its role in really helping shape these policies. We know that many times, government doesn't move quite as fast as maybe entrepreneurs do. So talked a little about that.
It's been clear from every conversation I've had the privilege of having with President Biden that he has been very focused on how we get this right for the American people, and in doing that, lead around the world. And we have a lot more work ahead, but a big step happened with his signing this executive order. So we're very happy about that and look forward to working with everyone to get there.
So we're going to use the next half hour, 45 minutes to really now jump into hopefully a room-wide dialogue. We're going to have Dan and a couple panelists come up and start the conversation. But again, join us on this journey, be vocal, raise your hand, be part of the conversation. And again, thanks for being here with us.
Please welcome Chief Content Officer of Worth Media Group, Dan Costa, President and CEO of the New York Academy of Sciences, Nicholas Dirks, and CEO of Malo Santo, XIA.
All right. What a great intro.
Definitely.
What a great intro. Nick and X, thanks so much for doing this tonight. Both of you are going to be on stage tomorrow. We're going to have lengthy conversations. But tonight, we really want this opening night to be sort of a roundtable conversation where we can get a lot of ideas out. We can engage the audience. I put this program together along with Caitlin because this is what we think people want to talk about and what we think is important in the world of AI. I think the people in the room may have different ideas, and I want to hear about them tonight. And it'll shape the conversations we have over the next couple of days. So thank you all for coming. We've got mic runners that are going to be out there. And I want to definitely involve the both of you because I also don't want the two of you to use all your best bits tonight and then not have them for tomorrow. But maybe the place to start is with the executive order. I read it yesterday on the plane on the way down here. It's pretty dry. I'm thrilled that in the first sentence, it uses the phrase promise and peril of AI, which I think we trademarked. I don't know how they were able to do that. But you got to be careful who you invite to these things. They steal your ideas. But what is your, I don't know if you've read it, but you've certainly heard some analysis of it. What do you think about this executive order in terms of setting the stage for our conversation about AI? Does it go too far? Does it not go far enough? What's your quick take on it?
I'll let you answer first then.
You've read.
Okay. First and foremost, like as a military veteran, right? Like I'm a military combat veteran. I think when we think about federal legislation, there's a desire for it to be more prescriptive, but it never has been. When you think about the Second Amendment, it says free speech. And over time and over state legislation and over, legislation that's happened within the Supreme Court, we've defined what that means. So same thing with the AI legislation that's coming out. I think a few key parameters that I've really felt were strong was, number one, the requirement that these tech companies who are producing generative models be able to watermark them so that we can know when something was definitively generated from a large language model or for an image or video generator, right? Which we can't do right now. In fact, there's a lot of issues around bias in education where companies are claiming that they've created large language model detectors that don't work, and now students are arguing, I handwrote my paper, and you're telling me ChatGPT wrote it when it didn't. Another thing that I really like about the AI legislation that's coming out, the executive order that Biden put out, is the requirements around safety. I think that safety is something, and fairness is something that is dynamic and not static. So to put a defined set of rules and say this is exactly what we mean when we say measure for fairness means that the law might not be applicable in the next 5 or 10 years, right? And so allowing that broad infrastructure allows us as citizens to shape what that means, allows it to change over time, and allows the unique model of sort of American legislation where it also empowers different states to be able to define what that means in their own context.
So I have not read the document. I actually just got off a plane from Shanghai where I was sharing all of the knowledge I have about AI with the Chinese. Not intentionally, but...
Excuse me, sir. Hold on now.
We allow that?
Hold on, Dan.
We are coming out firing on Sunday night.
Joke, right? But I certainly had been following some of the discussions that were going on in the White House and in OSTP beforehand. A former colleague of mine from Columbia, Londra Nelson, was deputy director of OSTP before Aditi joined, and was the primary person responsible for the AI Bill of Rights, which I think sort of created the kind of constitution in the first instance for what was to be done in the executive order. But I think, as we heard a kind of quick analysis from Arati tonight, which was fabulous to be able to listen to, we can take away a few things. First, it's just great that it's there. Just a few months ago, good friend of mine, Berkeley grad, I was at Berkeley for a number of years, Eric Schmidt, famously came out and said that he thought this was all far too complicated for government to have any sense of, and therefore the early work in regulation, governance, and so on and so forth should be done by the tech industry itself. And there are many representatives, of course, of the tech world here, and I think it has to be a partnership with you, but it has to include government. It has to include government for some of the reasons I think we heard tonight. Safety, what does that mean? I thought the example, for instance, about certifying drugs with clinical trials was a very good one, because in a sense, what the FDA does for pharmaceuticals is what we need to have done by some government agency so that at least certain kinds of standards around safety and the setting of standards in the first instance, and we heard about the National Institute for Standards and Technology, which is really something that can play an important role here, I think is critical for, again, ensuring that there is a kind of level playing field and a set of accountabilities that are built into the development of new AI products and the kinds of things that AI is going to bring in its wake. So I think that was an important takeaway. And I also think that, when we think about the risk, and there surely are risks, and you mentioned education, you mentioned it from the point of view of the students worrying that their work will be taken as ChatGPT generated and when they actually wrote it by hand. Well, my wife is still a professor, and she got a perfect paper from a student just last week. And it's very hard to know how to respond. And it, again, could be the case, and this
was their first perfect paper that they'd ever submitted?
First perfect paper, but the kind of the joke I was going to give when if you were going to ask me the question that you sent ahead of time, what is the greatest peril? Greatest peril is that for professors, they're going to have to read handwritten papers now instead of having them typed and produced by computers. But more seriously, I think in the military domain, in terms of autonomous lethal weapons, clearly there are possibilities that have been talked about for some time, well before generative AI. A colleague of mine at Berkeley, Stuart Russell, produced a film back in, I think, 2015, 2016 that scared everybody to death when they saw it. And of course, it was kind of early days of thinking about what the potential were there, what the potential of autonomous lethal weapons could be, and how we need to have certain kinds of regulatory frameworks around that, and I think ones that have to be global. But the promise is just extraordinary. And again, leaving aside the whole world of business, finance, products, I'll just say, and then I'll quit, briefly, that the kind of promise in terms of scientific research and discovery is just unbelievable. Just a couple of days before I went to China, I was listening to a computational biologist at NYU talk about the work he's doing. He's now doing it for a company that he started up that was acquired by Genentech in developing immunotherapies for cancer. And he is well along the way in using AI to identify certain kinds of immunotherapeutic possibilities for pancreatic cancer that in the lab seem to have the potential of neutralizing that cancer like that. That's just one example, and this is on the record. I shouldn't have said that probably, but I won't say anything more. But it's just an example of the extraordinary kinds of accomplishments, achievements, and discoveries that we'll be able to make with AI.
I love this. You've had the microphone once. You've already broken 2 NDAs. It's fantastic.
I'm an academic.
There's a reason we serve drinks before this panel. So let's, I mean,
I violated my wife's,
you're in all sorts of trouble.
Student-professor relationship. Three, you're out.
All sorts of trouble. So we've opened a variety of doors here. We're talking about AI in the military. We're talking about AI in medicine. I just want to pause and just go back to the executive order briefly, because one of the things that I thought was really impressive about it is that they defined a lot of terms. Mm-hmm. They're like, this is what we mean. We're using all this flowery language, but these are what the words mean. And they seemed like really authoritative, pretty good definitions. And I'm like, that's exactly what we want, just to know that the government understands the terminology and what's happening here. But to throw it out to the audience, and I told you we were going to do this in the audience, is how many people in the room have actually read the executive order or read a really in-depth summary of it? All right. Does anybody have any thoughts on what they read? Anybody? Anyone? Oh, Ken. Ken. What a shock. So I knew you would have read it. What did you think of it?
Well, so first, is this on? Yeah. I don't think I need it. You guys can hear me.
Oh no, it's on now. It's on.
Okay, now it's on. So first, my name's Ken Washington. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Medtronic. And I've been in and around AI for over 10 years, from autonomous vehicles to home robots to space technology and now medical devices. And I was heartwarmed by the fact that the government, the president, put out this statement. And I read it cover to cover, which is like, I don't say that lightly because it's really long, okay? And I would encourage all of you in the room to read it. It's really good. And I've known Arthi for years, and so she's the real deal. And I'm so glad that she is in our government service, because it's talent like that that needs to be in the government to do things like this. And as I read that document, here's what I took away, was that, first of all, this is a hard problem. And second of all, our government is thinking deeply about it. And third of all, it's going to take a village. This is not going to be easy. It's going to be really super hard. And I guess what I'd like to offer for this conversation is the fact that the way the document read for me was, it didn't present answers. It framed the problem in a way that gave the challenge back to the community for what needs to happen next. It gave direction and actions to agencies that need to work on things. And they need to work on things, and they have to be informed by the support and help of academia and industry. And so what I didn't hear from the CE in the document was, what's the framework for how we're going to engage and connect industry and academia and the government in these public-private partnerships so we can get after it? Because it's not going to be easy. We're not wired to do that. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts, this panel, on what can we do to encourage and advise that the government and industry and academia to operate differently so we can actually get after this, because this is a train and it's moving down the tracks really fast, and we got to get after it. So that's my reaction to it.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. Do you guys have any advice for how to do that? I mean, OpenAI is just, they're running. They're releasing product. You know, their announcements that Sam made last week about, turning the one ChatGPT engine into potentially thousands, customizable, and sellable, and creating a marketplace for artificial intelligences. That happened in 6 months. What's going to happen in another 6 months? And where's the role of like a public-private partnership in any of this?
Well, I'll just say a few things, but you mentioned academia and the role that academia plays, and that's obviously where I come from. But it seems absolutely critical to find new ways to, now the standard model is somebody does extraordinary work at Berkeley or Stanford or MIT or whatever, and then they have an idea, they go off and they start Databricks or whatever it might be, which was great because it helped fund brand new building at Berkeley and for data science, biggest gift the university ever got. But that doesn't address your question, and your question is really down the line, the most serious one. How to make sure that that they're part of the conversation that's going on both in industry and in government, and that part hasn't been really well worked out at all, and that's where the ivory tower actually does still apply, I think, in ways that are quite problematic. The question, of course, for me, and I'd be interested in your view about OpenAI, is that on the one hand, Sam talks a lot about what they're doing. On the other hand, he doesn't share the code. And Jan LeCun obviously has a different view, and at least for a little while, Meta was sharing code. But my question is, in order for some of the public participation in these kinds of conversations to really be optimized, if I can use that term, how much does the public need to know, and how problematic is that for industry and the private sector?
So I'll kind of add on to that. For context, I've been in artificial intelligence for over a decade as well. Started in the National Security Group, so like working in DoD, Special Operations, spent time at Microsoft, and I just recently left Google, where I was working across every single one of their research papers, AI products, their Google Cloud contracts, et cetera, to evaluate them for alignment with their AI principles. And I think first and foremost, that public-private partnership, we have to first acknowledge that there is a difference in motivations, right? Where researchers' full intention is to ask questions and answer them scientifically, whereas publicly traded companies' job and legal responsibilities to a professor at Harvard who was working on a better color scale. And we were like, yes, we're going to do it. And 3 weeks later, she was fired. And she was fired from Google because she had written a research paper challenging their approach to large language models called stochastic parrots. It's one of the most cited research papers in the LLM space right now. And she refused to publish it anonymously, and she was actually criticizing Google. So that tension and that relationship where Timnit said, I tested your system, it was biased, I'm not going to take my name off of it because it will make you look better, and a company saying, take your name off of it or you won't have a job, highlights the inherent tension between these two industries. So whether or not government has the ability to say, this is the best way for you to collaborate, or if they need to be separate in the first place, because the money and the interests and the purpose of conducting research are fundamentally different, right? Another thing is that artificial intelligence algorithms in general require a different level of care than regular applications. And we were talking about this tonight at our dinner table. If I say, for example, launch a mobile application that's a shopping platform, and you happen to have an older version of Android, and you download this shopping application on your old version of Android, you got KitKat or something like that, and you go in, and when you try to hit the checkout button, it doesn't work. How do I fix that as the developer? Well, I go in, I update the code, push it to the App Store, you download the new version, you're good to go. With algorithms, that's not how it works. With algorithms, they are trained to learn patterns from massive amounts of data set. So if you find that the algorithm is making judgments or decisions or is operating in a particular context in a way you don't want, you have to, one, recall the model. You have to take it back. Same like take your code back and look at it, but then you have to retrain it. You have to provide it enough data to unlearn the pattern that it's learned. So think about something like Google search, where it has for 25 years been the industry leader in search. And for many of those years, it has gotten over 1 billion queries a day. So if we find, or maybe we did or didn't find, I'm not breaking NDA here because they will sue me. If we discover that Google's search engine has made negative patterns and correlations, how do you generate enough data to retrain a model that has been trained for years on billions of queries? There is not enough synthetic data in the marketplace to do that. And on top of that, because everyone says synthetic data will save the day, there's a research paper that just came out that talked about a concept called model collapse, which is where if you train an AI model on too much synthetic data, it breaks and stops working. So synthetic data is not the answer. Human data is the answer. So to answer your question, that public-private partnership, one, should it even be forced? Or do we need them to be separate on some level because their inherent interests are separate? And two, to answer your question, as individuals, our job is to, one, become aware enough of how these systems work, to decide and to actually use our individual voices to say this is what we do and don't want. For example, there was a healthcare algorithm that we also talked about at dinner. Yeah, you guys had great salmon. Where we talked about the failure with United Healthcare Group. So United Healthcare Group called what we call in computer science a resource allocation problem, where we have an infinite amount of problems, but a finite amount of solutions. So they applied that to the issue of specialists in healthcare. You only have so many specialists who can treat a particular condition, but you have a lot of people who might need to see it. So they developed an algorithm that said, hey, how can we tell people and use this algorithm to determine who needs to actually go see this specialist? So the algorithm had all of the most unbiased data. It had all races, all genders, all sexual identities, all zip codes, because United Healthcare Group has like 50, 100 million people in the US in there, right? But the decision point that they used to decide whether or not you needed to see a specialist was how much you had previously spent on that condition. Yeah. Right? And the reason all of us are saying ouch is because culturally, depending on your ethnicity, your race, your socioeconomic status, your willingness to go to a doctor is going to change. I was at Microsoft and I had some of the best health insurance in the world and would not go to the doctor because the Army veteran in me was like, I'm not going to sick call, I can't do it, right? So the algorithm ended up being discovered that consistently, because that was the decision point that they used, consistently it was recommending that healthier white patients see the specialist over sicker black patients. Now the gag is because there is no regulation or laws, they didn't even have to tell people that it was an algorithm making the decision. There was no requirement that there be a human in the loop to monitor, review, and oversee that decision, right? So as humans, who are all active participants in this society, it is our job to say, look, I might not know the technicals of a recommendation versus a machine learning model versus a deep learning model, but if you're using AI, you need to tell me. You need to have the ability to redress harms or failures that it causes me. You need to have the ability to test your algorithms before you turn them on and affect my civil, my constitutional rights that are guaranteed to me being a person in this country. And so I think that we all have a collective responsibility to actually be intentional about shaping the future instead of being respondents to a future that other people's imagination shapes for us. Sorry for the tangent.
You got to save.
I got a lot more, y'all. I've been in this space a long time. I got a lot more for tomorrow.
That's good because you're on tomorrow too. You know that, right?
I got a lot more for tomorrow.
One round of applause. You got to do that tomorrow.
I got a lot more for y'all. I got all the tea that I won't spill and get sued by Google, but I'll spill it partially.
The other beauty of tonight is that we can jump around. We can jump around topics. know I want to hit jobs, dehumanization, and scientific advancement. So that's on my to-do list. If you have things on your to-do list, raise your hand. We'll get you a mic. Just say who you are, where you work, and you can ask your question. But let's do the pivot to jobs, because I think this is the thing that most people understand most intuitively, but almost deceptively. Like, it's not a simple. None of these are simple problems. There's not one problem that we're solving for here. It's a constellation of opportunities and issues that we are going to have to deal with, and the jobs question is just one among many. But I think it's an important one. I think it's something that we need to understand, which is, do we think this is going to be a net positive or a net loss? Is there something different about this technology compared to other technological innovations where we've always managed to squeeze out different jobs, even if they weren't the same jobs? And even in this case, there are jobs that are gonna go away. The same way the Luddites were not wrong, that their jobs were going away. There are jobs that are gonna be going away now, and as a writer and as an editor, a lot of those are going to be editing and writing jobs, the way I understand it. What are your thoughts? And then I want to hear from the audience as well.
Enjoy your time now.
I'm trying. I'm trying.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting thing that one of the major issues in both the writers and the actors' SAG-AFTRA strikes had to do with the use of artificial intelligence, not only to generate new content, but also to, of course, predicate that generation on the basis of using, without attribution, data that had been generated by generations of writers and creatives more broadly, and that has been resolved for the moment, thank God. But it's just a kind of canary in the coal mine in a much larger sense as to what's going to happen to everybody from journalists to people supporting legal firms that generate a huge amount of prose that looks like it could use a little bit of GPT to help it liven up, but is voluminous and of course hugely labor intensive in terms of its production. When McKinsey came out, when the global report came out a few years ago and predicted that there would be something like 50% of the jobs that we currently have just disappearing sometime between now and 2030, I think it was, that was a little bit of Mark Twain, a little premature, but it has been a bit of a mantra to say. There was the agricultural revolution, there was the industrial revolution, there was the first kind of digital age revolution, or however many industrial revolutions you want to denominate what's happened over the last 50 years as being. But this time one has capabilities that go across such a wide range of areas of production that it's very hard to really fully imagine what a future is going to be I think one thing that Arthi said that was important was that there are decisions to be made. It's not a natural process. That is to say, the implementation of AI across whether it's enterprise or scientific work or the law or what have you. There are decisions, and industry can make them, and Hollywood can make them. So I think that one of the important things that needs to be done is track how the future is actually unfolding, because it's very hard to predict, especially the future. But to track it in a way that allows one to calibrate certain kinds of changes over time. And I think that is one part of the story. The other part of the story, which is the more broad one, is the question of substitution or augmentation. And so far anyway, I don't think there's anybody here who would want to have an X-ray or a scan read solely by AI. You'd want to have a radiologist and a doctor look at it. But I think most of us would want to have AI take a look. And we know from just the most recent, and this leads into what you were going to ask about scientific discovery. But I mean, the recent progress that AI has made in identifying, potential issues in lung cancer diagnosis, for example, is extraordinary. And that kind of augmentation is something that you want to see happen. That doesn't necessarily put a lot of radiologists and doctors out of work. But there are a lot of other things that may well do that. And to your point, when you're looking at cost savings, and I'm not in the for-profit world, but whether I'm running a not-for-profit or whether I'm running a university, biggest expense is compensation, is salary. And you're always looking to see if you need people to do certain kinds of jobs that would just free up a little bit on that bottom line. I think it's going to be a mix of peril and promise that we still don't really have a full grasp of how that mix will play out.
So I did this 6 months ago, and no one raised their hand. But how many people in the audience know someone who's lost their job to AI and automation? Now there's like 5. Do you want to say what it was?
Law firm.
Law firm?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Doing law work?
Was it that law firm that laid off like 30% of their staff because they had an AI to do all their paralegal research? The one that was in the news? Maybe yes or no?
No, just one of it. Just one. But it is one of those. Yeah, the same type of processing, of like mass processing. I'll say, we were doing cover designs and illustrations and so forth for the AI issue, the issue that's out there right now. And there are a lot of AI-generated illustrations that are in the issue. They were not created by a graphic designer. Mm. They were created by Gabrielle Doré. Gabrielle, are you in the room?
Woo!
Gabrielle did a lot of those designs, and some of them were in contention for the cover, with not a lot of graphical background, but in Midjourney, with some refinement and some work. But a couple of days of work at most, compared to an illustration that we would have paid thousands of dollars for if we commissioned to a professional artist. Like, that's where we are now. Mm-hmm. And we probably wouldn't have paid an illustrator to do it anyway, but and Gabrielle had a lot of fun doing it. But the fact that she could do that without any graphical background as a side gig, using the technology to create something really pretty original and pretty extraordinary, like, I can see it happening. It's hard to keep that in a bottle.
So one thing I'll share, so a few months ago, one of my clients, L'Oreal, they had this big internal summit, and Scott Belsky, who is the chief product officer of Adobe, came and spoke. And one of the things that he said that really, really rocked my mind is, like, I remember when the digital camera first came out, and everybody was like, this isn't real photography, this is gonna kill photographers, this isn't how you do it, you need a darkroom, you need film, and then like Photoshop, like 2.0 came out, right? Which is very different than the Photoshop we use now. But it's that natural process of transition of systems. There will always be a resistance and a fear that there will not be a new place for old technologies in those systems. And that really, really stuck with me, right? And again, Adobe is one of the only companies on the industry that has a generative AI product that will legally indemnify you from copyright claims because they intentionally trained it on non-copyrighted data. So no, you're not going to get Spider-Man that looks like Spider-Man like you would if you go to Midjourney, but you can know that you can use those technologies to generate them for business purposes that are good. And so if we look at the digital technology revolution in terms of photography, right, what came out of that? Platforms like YouTube. Because people didn't need all this really expensive equipment to go and create films or to create movies or to create content. We all wouldn't know who Mr. Beast is in this room had there not been someone who first created the digital camera. So I think I'm pretty optimistic that there absolutely will be new markets created. What they look like, I'm not a fortune teller. I don't practice Santeria. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you that. But I can tell you that it's all up to us to collectively shape. To add on to what you said about keeping a historical record, right, about how these systems are built. One of the challenges that I've seen leaving private sector at some of the biggest tech companies is there is a desire to, well, because there are real security risks that when a model's information is made public, even if it's just through an API or an interface, there's something called model inference, which is where I can now reverse engineer the way your AI works by interacting with it enough. And so there's this balance here between companies being able to protect their private IP versus hackers being able to go and create copies of their models, right? So there's this desire to say, well, we can't tell you, government, how this AI works because it's our proprietary intellectual property. And the need for us to be like, but you're using it to make decisions about whether or not I get to see a doctor, or like 14 states in the United States have an algorithm that takes in the intake case of CPS reports, Child Protective Services, and assigns a risk score and says, this child is 100% likely to die or 90% likely to be severely injured. And even though when Illinois ran their study for 2.5 years from 2015 to 2017, they found it didn't work and it was super racially biased. There's a whole bunch of states out there that are using it. So if we are going to use these decisions in things that can affect our actual life, our actual well-being, there is a need for those things to be made transparent to someone. Now, is it me as somebody who's out here trying to sell AI to different movie studios? Like I work with Lena Waithe's movie studio, Hillman Grad. Probably not. I don't need to know how Google's models works, but that's something that I really love about the executive order. Is one of the very first provisions is that if your model is doing something that could be considered a concern to national safety, then you have to produce testing reports to the government when they ask for them. You have to red team your model, which means you go in and you try to break it. You try to make it do things that will violate civil rights. You try to make it do things that will violate constitutional rights, and you provide those reports to the government. I don't need to know, but we need to know that these algorithms, depending on the weight that they will have, are being held accountable. So I really don't care if Amazon recommends a book I do not want to read. But I really do care if I'm trying to go in and get conditions treated and they tell me I don't need to see a specialist because of an algorithm. So the levels of risk are different. I think something that we're going to see unfold over the next couple, probably 6 months to a year, that'll be really interesting is how the federal government defines what is considered a matter of national security. The EU, with their AI Act, has been very, very particular. If it touches a European Union fundamental right, then you have to come in and you got to document it, test it, prove you didn't use copyrighted data. You need to produce accountability and fairness testing reports this often, and we need to be able to ask for them on demand. They went real specific. So where we are in that generic space, I think that there's opportunity for us to help shape that collective future by saying, do we want it to replace our jobs? Do I want an AI deciding whether or not a child should be taken from their parent? Is that even something I want AI to do? Do I want AI to be telling police officers where they should be sitting in communities? Because there's an application called Peril, which is used by every major police department in the country, which takes historical crime data, which has all types of problems in how it's recorded and stored, predicts where a crime is going to happen next, and tells them where they should be policing. Even though it's not working, every major police department keeps renewing it. Is that something we want AI to do? Is it good at that? And that's our responsibility to shape, and not just at a federal level. This isn't just about what is the president going to do. This is about what is your city going to do? What is your county going to do? What is your state going to do? So you look at the city of Berkeley, California, and go Bears, by the way. I'm a 2-time Berkeley dropout, whoop, whoop. And so the city of Berkeley has banned the use of facial recognition technology in policing. They have not banned body cameras. What they've said is that you can't take this body camera and try to guess if this person is someone who has a warrant out. Why not? Well, let's go back to 2-3 months ago when Portia Woodruff, a woman who was 8 months pregnant, was misidentified by a facial recognition system as being a criminal, spent the night in jail, had to be rushed to an emergency hospital because she started labor. And the Detroit chief of police about 3 years ago literally said, these systems are inaccurate 94, 98% of the time, and then they turn around and renewed the contract. So these conversations about how AI is going to play out, whether or not it should be able to take your job, whether or not it should be able to shape the future of our society in a way that we do or do not want, is all up to us collectively. So my company, Malo Santo, which is Spanish for bad saint, is a homage to that idea that it is good or bad depending on what we choose. And you cannot leave it up to folks like me, folks like Nick, to figure it out for you. We all have to collectively shape this future so that we can leave for our children, our grandchildren, or my 10 nieces and nephews, a world that we can say we're truly proud of.
All right, we've stirred enough pots here to get some feedback. Let's go to some questions. We've got 2 in the front here where we need mics. We'll start right here, and then we'll go to the back. It's a little harder for me to see the back, but I'll get there next.
Hi, my name is Charlene Lee. And just a comment about jobs. It is such a dichotomy, like are jobs going to be created or jobs being lost? And I think the quality of jobs and the future of work is also at stake here. The research I'm finding is that, and some of the research being put up by some of the business school professors in the Jagged Technology Edge was a really good research where they did research with BCG, and they looked at the people who actually got the best performance gains were the people at the bottom. And so you're seeing at companies, early adopters are saying, we're not going to so much remove people from jobs, but we want to see how they can be onboarded, increase their productivity, increase actually the enjoyment of their work. Because tedious, mendacious things that you have to do, the mundane things you have to do just go away. And so the people who are using these AI are saying joy is coming back into their work.
That is the promise.
That's the promise.
That
the
is the
peril
promise.
is the work that you actually do may not be the work that you are skilled to do. And are you willing to be skilled? Are you willing to be upskilled? Because some people are just like, no, I don't want to do that one. And so my biggest concern is the equitable aspect of this. And when I talk to companies and countries outside of the Western area, they're looking at AI as a huge potential leapfrog. And countries in Africa say we have 30% unemployment. It isn't that people can't find jobs. You don't have people to do the jobs. You don't have the education to be able to do this. And now they say with AI, we can give it to them. It is a huge game changer. So I think we need to get more nuanced. And just saying like big numbers going away. It's the nature of work. It's fundamentally going to change. So just a thought.
I think that's a great point. And the globalization of the effect that these technologies will have in a global marketplace is very different than the way we normally talk about it and think about it. And I think hopefully we get to some of that in the next couple of days.
If I can add something onto that, just real quick. If AI is teaching machines how to think and act like humans, generative AI is teaching machines how to think and act like the human imagination. And the imagination is so unique because it's the biggest nation in the world. We can all freely join it and become citizens of it. And something that I appreciate about AI is that it makes access to the imagination more equitable. Where I myself grew up one of 8 children to a single mother in a very low-income neighborhood in a suburb of San Francisco, I always wanted to go make videos and art. My mama was not buying art supplies for me. We had milk, we had the food we needed. She was struggling to decide if we let the light bill go off or the phone bill go off. So imagination to me was not something I had access to outside of survival. And so I think when we think about these technologies and how they can augment them, I think that there's going to be a new wave of innovation that comes because folks who have not previously had access to the materials, the resources, or to your point, the education, are going to have them to then have a collective say, and this is a new company we should build, or this is a new type of app we need, or this is a new way of doing this existing process that we should do. So I think one thing I don't want to discount is the amount of new voices that will be at the table to shape this, whereas we're so used to pushing our voice onto everyone else. There's also this new wave of access that's being gifted to people who haven't had it because of differences in socioeconomic status, because of where they were born, where they're now going to get to play a part in shaping the collective sort of economy moving forward.
Excellent. In the back, I think we have a mic. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Matt Webb. I own a flower shop in the Tampa Bay area. About the jobs real quick, I'm okay with AI getting rid of some of the lawyers.
My divorce attorney, take her.
Not all of them. But one of the pitfalls of AI that y'all have talked about is garbage in, garbage out. The data that the AI is making the decisions on is not good data. You were talking about the police departments. They got to spend that budget. They won't get it next year. Okay, so they're using that database, which has bogus data on crime, because the cops were getting incentivized to write those tickets and arrest those people for that crime. So that's not good data. The health questions of, should we allow an AI to make that decision whether you get to go see a specialist or not? That algorithm was written by a human being that was told by an accountant to make that decision. So they don't have to spend the money. So that's one of the things regulation can help with, is you're not allowed to do that. Let us see your code. On the jobs, back to that, I've worked with programmers all my life. The amount of increase in productivity and programming is just going to skyrocket. AI somebody asked it to write a virus 4 or 5 months ago, 100 lines of code, had 2 or 3 bugs in it. The guy fixed it, and the virus worked. Now, that's crime. That's not good. But new technology is, as Jim said to us tonight, new technology is always used first by criminals. So we've got to regulate that also. That's my comment.
I do think the ChatGPT was first used by students cheating on their homework. Like, it's pretty well established. That was released on a Tuesday, and kids were handing in papers on Wednesday. That was quick. Like, that escalated quickly. But those are really great points. I appreciate that. We got a question up here in front.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I think the most important part here is the voice of responsible media. Because while we talk about algorithms, in this room, I would suggest that we're not the general public, or we wouldn't be here. So the ability to even question whether those algorithms are, should we ask that, is a part. The part about, is AI going to take jobs or not take jobs? Well, it's like, are robots going to take jobs or not take jobs? MZ already says that there's not enough human beings to replace the workers that are moving out of the workforce. So we don't have AI and we don't have robotics to be able to work in those places, but we don't tell that part of the story. And I sent Dr. Dirks a note in LinkedIn. I was at an event earlier this week with the National Defense Industry Association, and they're talking about international students and research and all these different pieces. Well, universities, international students pay full price. So when we swing the pendulum back and forth and we don't tell the whole story, we want to limit this. So how do we have responsible parameters and minimize the swinging pendulum? It's by responsibly telling the different voices of customer that are all involved in here. And so we can sit in this room and talk about this, but who's going to tell the story in a media format that's actually data-based and has like that 360 review? So to me, I'm hoping that that's what we're going to see. So that part of the story, I'd really love to hear you guys talk about that and your role as responsible media.
Yeah, that's a tricky question because it assumes that there's an audience that will be receptive to that type of thinking and that type of processing, that will understand the balances and be able to handle that kind of nuanced approach. Responsible media. I remember that.
Do you? Yeah.
Back in the day, those are really good points. I want to get a couple. We got another, Caitlin. We got another one right here, real quick. Let's go back there.
Oh, okay, mine will be quick. So you said we were done with stirring the pot, but I am going to go back to something that you had said, Dan, about Gabrielle doing some amazing artwork with prompts, and it saved you thousands of dollars.
Yeah, to be clear, we probably weren't going to spend those thousands of dollars anyway.
Well, not sure that's what you said. My point being, though, is when you have that situation with AI, where does those thousands of dollars go that you would have originally spent, right? They're not going to the person who put the prompts in. Where should they go? That's a big ethical question.
Wait, Gabrielle's getting a raise?
Yeah, no, she's getting a bonus for prompting her way into the magazine.
No, that's exactly that's the substitution problem, right? Of like, can we do this through AI in a way that's cheaper and more efficient? And these tools were just not available to us before. I mean, the AI revolution is unfolding now, but I mean, the digital revolution where, I worked at a magazine where we had copy editors. No magazines have copy editors anymore. Like that's all, you're lucky if you have more than one person read a story before it gets published online. Like the media industry has moved more quickly. We've embraced all these tools. The writers we used to have producers that would take copy and code it in HTML and publish it on the website.
Jeez.
Those are two different people, a writer and a producer. And then, the media industry purged all the copy editors, they purged all the producers, and now the writers are almost their own editors as well. Like this has been the evolution of the media industry. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but like that's where we are now.
I think in general it's been the evolution of innovation. Like the guy who used to go and decide to take your message from here to the other side of the country, what did he think was going to happen to his job when they made the first cart for a horse? Right? When the Model T was being produced, what did all those folks who had businesses that were built around horses carrying your packages or your people from place to place, what did they think? Right? And I think that it's very easy to be tempted to look at ourselves in a bubble, like somehow we're different from any other fundamentally shifting innovation that's happened. But we've been through this before. Humans have survived. We've created new industries. We've created new opportunities. And also to address the issue of bias and opportunity, the first car did not have a wheelchair ramp. Right? There's a process of including people, and I think the more we do that intentionally up front, first of all, that's the best business advantage you can have, but second of all, like, it's always iterative. It's never going to be perfect at the start. That's not what's happened with any technology. I mean, have you guys seen the patents for the first toilets that are not the ones we sit on today? They were crazy. Or even like some of the first medicines that were like, a woman's having menstrual cramps, stick leeches on her. We've come a very long way from that, right? And so I think that, when we think of these innovations as a conversation and a process, not a destination, it is the journey that we are embarking on. To not get lost in the fatalism or the extremism of, the South Park guy who's like, they took our jobs. Like, that's not where we're going. It's what jobs can we create in that opportunity? What new industries, what new verticals can we shape? What new social media platforms will be birthed? What new types of interactions and industries will be birthed? Because I guarantee you, YouTube was not an idea in anybody's mind in 1989 when my ass was born. That just wasn't something people thought of. I mean, I grew up going to Radio Shack. Now my phone is a radio. I don't even listen to radio. I pay Spotify money to use it, right? So we are living in the collective imagination of a few individuals who have built these companies and shaped them. And I think that AI gives us an opportunity to make sure that our imagination is represented in the way that the future is shaped.
So I have good news and bad news. All right, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Too antisocial for this.
No, it's perfect. Good news and bad news. Bad news, we're wrapping up for the night. Good news, this is the beginning of 3 days of conference and conversation, so we're just getting started. Before we end, though, I think that one of the things, and the last thing on my list, is this idea of the dehumanization that these technologies may represent. And you could hear it in people's voices on a variety of different topics, whether it's justice reform or whether it's replacing jobs, whether it's healthcare, like all these different applications. There's this underlying concern that these technologies may be dehumanizing in some way we don't fully understand. And I want to, Nicholas, I want to give you the last word. In terms of the humanity, how do we hold on to our humanity as this technological revolution unfolds?
So, I'll talk more about this tomorrow, but I think, we are all, beginning to take stock of some of the effects of the technology that led to social media. And we now hear from, the Surgeon General, there's a loneliness epidemic. And, there are endless articles about the isolation of individuals and the difficulty to have friends and relationships and meaningful human contact. And again, a kind of almost behavioral change that makes many young people, or at least so some of these studies suggest, feel more comfortable engaging with the intermediation of a screen or a phone or some kind of device or whatever. And I think, we all have to now imagine both the promise and the peril of taking AI technologies, LLMs, replica robots or Pi interlocutors, and putting that on top of what has already happened in social media, on the one hand. On the other hand, though, I think what has been so interesting for me anyway is to see that, right now, philosophy is having a renaissance. Philosophy of consciousness, philosophy of mind, ethics. Because all of the kinds of questions that are age-old, going back to Descartes or whoever, I think, therefore I am, does that mean that a machine can or cannot become sentient, et cetera, is also part of an interrogation of what it means to be human in relationship to the machine. And that is one of the most interesting conversations that's going on, and it's actually focusing some attention on what it is that is specific to humanity, even as one is expanding and connecting human possibility to technology, whether it's through AI or CRISPR-Cas9, or you name a number of other things that are going to, again, challenge the boundaries of what we think of as the human being. And of course, again, the question or the challenge for us is, what do we do with this? Because it can be a very dystopian scenario. And you can sit here, and if you had Max Tegmark and Jan Tallinn and a bunch of people who are really, really able to spin tales of existential risk to the point where you wouldn't sleep tonight, it's clearly going to be bad for humanity. But if you actually take this process, and I think this is what we were both trying to say, at a human level, and say human beings actually have a role in shaping what this is going to be. We have this motto at the New York Academy of Sciences, shaping the future of science, by which I mean, or we mean, that we have to play an active role in shaping how science will be used, because otherwise you can build a bomb or you can build nuclear energy. What is it going to be? Anyway, I think it's an interesting story.
I love it. We're going to explore it over the next couple of days. Nicholas, X, thanks so much for joining us. Give him a big round of applause. Hey,
Awesome.
You were terrific.
I loved your
Go Bears. I didn't realize that you were at work there.
So I'll let you guys off. So a little housekeeping before I let you go. For the very intrepid among you, 6:45 tomorrow morning, the Spartan workout will be leaving from the lobby. Woo! 6:45 in the lobby, Spartan workout. I am told it's not that strenuous. Like, you will enjoy it. Let me know. Let me know when you come in at 9. I'll be here. 8 a.m. breakfast will begin in the Haven Lounge on the second floor. We will also have an innovators breakfast starting at 8 a.m. hosted by Mr. Ken Washington from Medtronic. That is worth going to. And then at 9 a.m. we'll be in this room. We'll start our programming. Kerry Washington will be here. It's a really great program. I think you're going to enjoy it a lot. Thank you so much for coming, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you again to our partners, BMC, KPMG, Lake Nona, Medtronic, the Orlando Economic Partnership, and GM Advisory Group, Wealth Sphere Advisors. Have a good evening, and we will see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.